Hello there. Welcome to the channel. This morning, Remarkable had a major press release. I've been thinking about it all day, and I've got some thoughts. So I thought maybe for the first time I would do a reaction video because I think a lot of the things I'm thinking about now won't end up in any of my future reviews. And I did purchase the device, so I will be doing a full suite of reviews on this device. But I just had some thoughts I wanted to get out there while they're fresh. And hopefully we'll have kind of some fun with this and see how it goes. But my first reaction video, so let's get into it. So first off, let's talk about the device itself. And actually, wait, just before we get to that, just to set the stage for those that don't know, there was an announcement a few days ago, maybe even just 2 days ago, I can't quite remember, that this formal announcement would be made this morning from Remarkable, and immediately, Reddit was abuzz, and for the most part, people were looking for the Remarkable 3. I mean, there were definitely certain things people were looking for, but everyone was hoping for a new device, and they thought that it was going to be the Remarkable 3. Turns out, not quite. Now, a lot of the things people were hoping for did show up. There was a new device announced. But it was called the Remarkable Paper Pro, I believe, or I'm just calling it the Remarkable Pro. So not really a Remarkable 3, but kind of. The Remarkable 2 will continue to be sold, so it's not like that's going away. It's this new, larger device that's checking some of the boxes that people were looking for. So while not a Remarkable 3, I think the general feeling so far in the wake of the announcement is kind of this wave of positivity. So a lot of people were pretty happy about the announcement. At least that was the case when I looked at Reddit shortly after. So let's talk a little bit about the device itself and talk a little bit about like what I think are some of the highlights. And we're going to start unusual here, but this is from my perspective. I think that the marquee item is the fact that it's a 12-inch screen, and technically it's 11.8, but we'll call it 12. Now, the reason why I say that is I haven't talked much in my videos about this, but devices right now generally come in either 10.3 or the larger size then jumps to 13.3. And most of the devices that sell well in this market are the 10.3 variety. And those are the devices I mainly review. And I don't mention this in the reviews, but sometimes, while I love the portability and I generally like the screen size of the 10-inch models, I do sometimes feel a little cramped even then, or just longing for a slightly larger screen. And I have tried a 13-inch device before, and I found it to be like totally clunky, not what I thought it would be, and all the benefits I'd hoped to get weren't that great, and there were a lot of negatives that came with it in terms of it being much larger, much heavier, and I could just keep going on. So for me, a 13-inch isn't a good option. So what's exciting to me about this is the first device that I'm aware of that sits in the middle, right in the middle between these 10 and 13-inch devices. So that's kind of exciting for me, and I just can't wait to kind of actually try it out and see, do I really want something bigger, or will I find, much like I found with a 13-inch device, maybe 10 is a sweet spot after all. So I'm super curious about that. Now, my number 2 thing that I've noted about this device, and this is probably most people's number 1, is the fact that it has a color screen. I mean, that's probably the marquee for most people. So there's a little bit of background here. So for those of you that don't know, maybe you're just kind of cluing in to the e-note-taking space for the first time, or have only gotten maybe you've only had the Remarkable in the past. So you may not be aware that the dominant color e-ink technology right now is known as Kaleido 3. So the way Kaleido 3 works is it's these little microcapsules that are, that's your black and white. That's just like a normal e-ink screen that you'd have, say, on a Kindle or what have you. But then there's this color layer that's on top of those microcapsules, and that's what regulates the color. The downside of that is because you have this layer, you end up with a darker screen. But even beyond that, there's other limitations to Kaleido 3. You only have 4,000 colors, so you don't get great color accuracy. The color density, it maxes out at 150 ppi, where we're starting to get used to screens that have as much as 300 ppi for black and white, so it's notably less than that. And there's other limitations as well. So a lot of people really don't like Kaleido 3. It's been very divisive. I myself am actually, I like it quite a bit. But having said that, I remember one poster, and I can't remember if this was on my videos or if this was something I read on Reddit, but they made the statement of, eventually we're going to look back when we have the next generation color technology and wonder why we even bothered with Kaleido 3. And I actually agree with that sentiment. My only pushback to that is wake me up when we get there. It's taken 15 years to get to Kaleido 3. I think given that history, I'm really impressed by Kaleido 3. But I totally agree. At some point, something else is going to come around, and it's going to be better, and we're going to ditch our Kaleido 3 devices at that time. So that's a little bit of background. And the reason why I'm mentioning that to you is this device is not Kaleido 3. This device is actually based on the Gallery 3 technology, also known as Advanced Color ePaper, if I remember, ACEP. And that's different. So instead of having your black and white microcapsules with a color layer, you've got 4 different colors of microcapsules, which include white, cyan, yellow, and magenta. In fact, right near my feet, I have a laser printer, and those are the exact colors it uses, except it swaps the white for black. Now on paper, Gallery 3 is way better than Kaleido 3, right? So think about this. Gallery 3 promised when it was announced 300 PPI, both black and white and color. You would have the ability to either go in black and white or have color, so you could actually switch between the two. You could have up to, I think it was 50,000 colors, and all sorts of things. On paper, Gallery 3 was the answer, and Kaleido 3 was the inferior product. Now, interestingly enough, they were both released or announced about a month apart from each other. And then it took both about a year, roughly, to finally make it to market. Since then, there's only been one Gallery 3 device, and everything else has been Kaleido 3. So Gallery 3, as it turns out, is a hot mess. A terrible technology, and all those benefits I talked about, most of them anyway, were never realized. And I did a few videos on this, but things like it didn't really have a white background, which is one of the hopes. So instead of a dark layer like you have with the Kaleido, you'd hope to have a white background. Well, mine was like pink on the device that I had. That's the Bigme Galley, the only device until now that's been released with Gallery 3. It was slow, it was cumbersome, the writing was weird, the way that it rendered colors. Black was great. Writing in black was pristine, but writing in other colors exhibited strange behaviors depending on the color. Sometimes you'd write a color and it would show up in one tone, and then the screen would refresh and it would be a different color as it rendered. Just very weird and very sluggish, and the battery drain was terrible. Everything about Gallery 3 was a complete disaster in the Bigme Galley, and so nobody else touched it. So for the Remarkable Pro to say we've got color using Gallery 3, it brings a lot of interesting questions. One hand, great, it's not the Kaleido 3. Maybe we're finally moving on, and there's a lot of evidence based on what Remarkable talked about, that they've done a lot of work with the technology to kind of cover up or improve upon some of its limitations. But we'll see how well did they do that. There's some sense that there's still some rendering issues with the color. What does that mean in terms of battery life? There's just a lot of open questions. But a lot of the renders that they put on the screen looked really good. And so I think a lot of people, and quite rightly, are excited about the aspect of color and excited about the fact that they decided to go to Gallery 3 and what can Remarkable do that Bigme couldn't do previously. And that's kind of what's going on there. Another interesting thing, and it was very hardly touched upon, but if you go through the purchasing process, it's mentioned that the stylus from the original Remarkable, or rather the Remarkable 2, won't work on the Remarkable Pro. They've designed a separate stylus that works specifically for the Pro. It's not a charge stylus. So why won't other styluses work? Well, presumably it's because they're using a different technology than Wacom. I don't know. We'll learn more about that later, but that was another curiosity. Just beyond that, I won't go into all the other specifications, but the storage was pretty good. I think it was 64 gigabytes. I might be wrong on that, but certainly way more than the 8 gigabytes of the Remarkable 2. The RAM and the processor were not particularly impressive, but honestly, if you can hone your software, you don't need a great processor or a lot of RAM. So it's possible that won't be an issue, although some initial reviews are kind of questioning that. So I'm a little concerned about that aspect, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a problem. So we'll see what it looks like when it comes out. The big issue, and the most obvious one, and the unequivocal issue, is the price. So the cheapest combination you can get, right? So this is meaning you buy the device, you buy a stylus, and you buy the cheapest cover, is just like, I think, $20 or $30 short of $700. And of course, you have combinations that can go beyond that, and that's before taxes. So this is an expensive device, and as I've watched the market and followed it, 500, 550 is kind of the sweet spot, and when you start moving beyond that, you're really getting into a place where your sales drop significantly because it's just kind of outside the range of what people are willing to pay for. So, an interesting question here is, does the Remarkable brand transcend that? And will they sell a lot of copies? I mean, it will sell. I mean, don't get me wrong. It'll be a success because of the Remarkable brand. But will it have the staying power and the sales levels that we've seen with the Remarkable 2, or at least in the neighborhood of that? And we'll see. We'll see what that looks like. Most of the presentation was either about the hardware or it was about the philosophy of the device. They didn't go much, that I recall, into the software itself. It looked like it was pretty much the software as we already know it. Put some comments in if I missed something or forgot something, but it was really about the device itself. Talking about the presentation, I remember going about halfway through the presentation and going, wow. Because what they were doing is they were basically talking about how their device positioned in the market, but not the market that we think of, the e-note-taking market. Like, they didn't mention anything about that at all. They were basically positioning their device. They didn't say this expressly, but they were basically positioning it against an iPad, against other electronic devices out there, phones or tablets. I mean, they were really focusing broadly on their product and how they were presenting it. And the thing that really stuck with me halfway through the presentation is, wow, they can do that. Like, other companies can't do that. Maybe a Kindle could, and Amazon can get away with that because they have a brand reputation that's even greater than Remarkable's. But no one else besides Amazon and Remarkable could basically say, here's our product and we're going to take on the world, and get people to go along with that. So I remember thinking how impressive that was. And then they kind of turned on me, because in the second half they made a number of comments where they did actually go after some competitors. And I don't remember the exact thing they say, except one. I remember them going after or saying something to the effect of, we don't release multiple devices every year. A clear slam on books, even though books wasn't mentioned by name. So I had this epiphany about like how they were taking the high road and how they could get away with it. And then the second half, they kind of ditched that philosophy, which I thought was kind of funny. The other interesting thing is that when you think about Remarkable, the tagline they tend to go with is the world's thinnest tablet. In fact, if you do a web search, that's what comes up, which, by the way, as an aside, just completely drives me nuts. Because it's a number of months now since the Boox Go has been released, the 10.3, which is a much thinner, well, not a much thinner, is a thinner tablet than the Remarkable 2. So this idea of Remarkable being the world's thinnest tablet isn't true anymore. And you can just tweak it, right? And still kind of make the same marketing point. You could say among the world's thinnest tablets or whatever, something like that. But nope, they're sticking with the world's thinnest tablet. And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, right? It's just marketing. It's kind of like saying, Nathan's has the world's best hot dog. It's like, we've got the world's thinnest tablet. But still, sometimes those details kind of rub me the wrong way. But for most people, you shouldn't care. But I find that both annoying and funny at the same time. But the theme of this presentation wasn't the thinnest tablet, although they certainly touted that this Pro is a thin tablet, generally speaking. But it was more about being distraction free. So I have some thoughts about that. Now, I want to say off the bat that distraction from electronic devices is, from my perspective, a legitimate thing. And I don't think anything embodies this more in my life than Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams is, as many products with Microsoft, both brilliant and terrifying at the same time. And in this particular case, they have this feature where you can put yourself on Do Not Disturb, but if certain people ping you, that message will go through anyway. I mean, it's insane. So the only way that you can truly be distraction-free on Teams is to completely shut it off, which isn't always practical. So I get, on a personal basis, what it's like to have messages ping and to distract you and to take away from focus. So I don't argue that that's not a thing. The problem I kind of have, and I'd love to hear your comments if you have an alternate view on this, but the problem I have is, what exactly are we talking about here? Because can't most devices be distraction-free if I turn off notifications? Like, isn't that something that you can actually just select? And I can hear the counter argument to that basically being, well, yeah, they do, but for some people, if you're tempted because you have maybe apps on your device, you're tempted to turn that Do Not Disturb off, and that ruins the distraction-free environment. People can't help themselves, and I kind of get that. Actually, I mean, I still kind of get that, but then I go to, well, don't these people have phones? So if they're willing to turn off any things that prevent distractions so that they will get distracted, don't they have their phone with them? I mean, the only way this makes sense is if they're taking their device and they're sequestering themselves in this kind of sealed chamber where you don't have any other electronics, because you either argue that you can turn your devices off, in which case there's nothing special about the Remarkable at all. Most devices can do that. Or you're making the argument that people are incapable of doing it, so the device saves you from that. I don't know. I'm probably being a stickler on this, and I'm very willing to hear other perspectives on this. This is just my opinion on that. But I really wonder about this distraction-free argument. Again, I get it. I get there's a there. I'm just not clear about how Remarkable is more distraction-free than other devices if you can turn them off. Anyway, I've said it. I won't say it any further. Now, if they went with a different tactic and they said Remarkable provides you a more focused experience, then I'm on board with that, because that's what they do. They have an interface. They don't have a lot of clutter. If you're engaging with the notes, there's not a lot of buttons and things crowding out the screen. So they do a great job of creating this kind of inviting environment in order to interact. It's not going to distract you, for lack of a better term. So if they said that, I'm more on board with that concept. It's the distraction-free one that's kind of like, And that was a huge theme of their presentation. But I do know that a lot of people believe in it. So again, please put in the comments where my thought process is not right, and I'd love to hear from that. So what was interesting, in addition to the core presentation, was then the follow-up to that. There were a number of YouTubers that released videos almost simultaneous with the launch of the Remarkable presentation, which of course means that they were made aware well in advance that this was coming, had their videos prepared, probably had a moratorium on releasing, and then release those when they could, once the announcement was made. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I scoured through a few of them just to see what folks were saying, and found them interesting. One, though, I just can't help but smile about. And so I won't mention who it was, but at some point in the video, this person just started just praising Remarkable in a way that struck me as almost over the top. Like it was, I felt like this guy was about to wax poetry almost at some point, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like, is this guy saying this? And it's not that I necessarily disagreed with what he was saying. 'Cause I'm not even sure I know what he was saying. I was just so distracted by the hyperbole that kind of just came out of nowhere. I just remembered that, and I just thought it was hilarious. And again, I think about it throughout the day, and it kind of makes me smile. In addition to YouTubers, there was other media. Tom's Hardware notably kind of did a pre-review, I guess, of the device, and that's where I got a little bit of that feedback that there might be some laggy performance with the color, but again, it wasn't a full review, and that's just one source, so we don't know. But yeah, it's interesting that there was a lot of coordination, and that's, I guess, what you would expect from a pretty notable company like Remarkable, and especially one that doesn't release devices very often. I'm sure they took time to try to connect with people and really make a media blitz out of this, and they seem to have done a pretty good job with that. In the big picture, one of the things that really strikes me, and I've noted this first with the Boox-Go 10.3, I'm kind of noticing this, and you'll see this reflected in my review of the Viwoods Mini AI paper, and this as well, this device as well, even though I haven't reviewed it. It's all pointing towards something I didn't expect. So let me just take a quick step back before I explain or go to what I'm talking about. So every few months I do prediction videos, and it's just for fun. My predictions tend to be wrong, obviously. I just kind of know the trends, and I try to anticipate what's going to happen. Every once in a while I get something right, but I don't have a particularly great record. But when I looked ahead at this year, I kind of had the sense of that we might see maybe a slowdown in the type of devices that are coming out, that we were starting to kind of reach a maturity stage in the market, or that we might start seeing different types of devices come out. So you'd see a little more creativity and how e-ink was being utilized, like maybe in a clock, and we kind of saw that a little bit with the e-ink phones from Bigme. I mean, it's not that we hadn't seen e-ink phones before, but I think they released the first color one, and we hadn't seen those types of phones in a while. So there was a little bit of innovation there. But what I didn't anticipate, and the Remarkable Pro kind of doubles down on, is this just continued stratification of the market. So, if I thought about the Boox-Go, again, going back to that, it's a great product. I recommended it. A lot of positive things to say about it. But the one thing I noted in my review video is this doesn't seem to replace anything. You know what I mean? You could argue that it kind of replaced the Note Air 3, the black and white version, although the Note Air 3 is still around, and especially if you want front lighting, that's what you would go to as opposed to the Go. So it didn't really replace it. The Viwoods, I'll get to that review in a couple weeks, but I've got a grid of 8-inch models, and I've got 5 devices on that grid, including the Viwoods. I can recommend them all. And with Remarkable, this isn't replacing the Remarkable 2. So we're just seeing more devices that start looking at, a more focused cut of the market, as opposed to replacing what came before. And I didn't see that coming. These are a lot of major devices that just are expanding the market, I guess, or they're offering, not that, but they're offering more choice. But can a niche market like this support all that? I mean, I guess it can, because that's what we're seeing, but I did not see this happening. I did not see this continued stratification. And that surprises me. For example, example of the counterpoint to that, or not the counterpoint, but the contra to that, which is, hopefully relatively soon, we'll hear the announcement of the final release of the SuperNote A5X, right? We're all been waiting for it. There's some signs, hopefully, that it's about to be released. When that comes out, it replaces the A5X, right? In fact, the A5X is pretty much already gone, at least in terms of new sales. So that's normal, but we're not doing that. Like all these devices over the last 4 or 5 months have not been replacing things. They've just been segmenting the market even further. And it's weird. Like I don't know what to make of it. I mean, choice is supposed to be good, right? But to me, there's also a point where it's like, does it just make it even that much harder to figure out if you're a new person coming in, like what's the device for you? I used to say to people that the device for you is going to depend on your use case. So what is you want the device to do, and then figure out what device kind of meets that closely. I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's use case and preferences. And that determines what the right device is, because there's just so much choice out there. And again, in theory, not a bad thing. But if you have no idea where you stand on things like color or no color, 300 PPI versus something less, and the Pro, by the way, comes, I think, in 227 or something around there. It wasn't 300. Things like that, I think they say front lighting already, front lighting or no front lighting. All those aspects, you don't know like what, and hopefully that's one of the things I try to do in my videos, but it just feels like it's getting harder and harder. And I don't know. Let me know too in the comments if you're relatively new. Do you find this even more confusing, or is just are you just on the side of this is great choice and everything's wonderful? I mean, these are all great devices. All those devices I mentioned, that's stratifying. I can say like, well, and we don't know yet about the Remarkable, but I'm imagining it's probably going to be pretty good because of the source and the care that they're taking in, when they release a device. The track record's good, in other words. Yeah, just let me know what you think. They're all great devices, but is this a good thing or not? I think it is, but I don't know. So those were pretty much my thoughts from the day. It was a fun day. It's always great when you get surprised and there's something exciting happening, and this is definitely one of those things. I bought the device. I don't know when it's going to arrive, but when it does, we'll go through the normal battery. I'll unbox it. We'll do the visual tour. I'll do battery test results, and then other miscellaneous things, and then we'll see what the final pros and cons are. So that'll be fun, and I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully you are too. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I just wanted to kind of just my thoughts as they're fresh, and we're less than 24 or even. Gosh, it wasn't even that long ago, was it? It's a little over 12 hours, I guess, since the announcement. So just thought I'd share, and hopefully this was fun, and look forward to your comments and discussions. And until then, see you next time.